Our story begins as Kisa Gotami went to the marketplace and encountered a man sitting by a pile of gold, trying to sell it as though it was worth nothing more than dirt. Gotami asked him, "Oh, wait, sorry, obviously you want to know who this Gotami was. Okay, here's some background. Her real name was actually Gotami Tissa, and she came from a family of very low social standing, growing up in the extreme poverty of the slums. Everyone called her Kisa Gotami. Kisa means skinny, and she certainly was thin and fairly tall. People liked Gotami because, despite of all the hardships, she had a sweet, caring disposition. What neither she nor her relatives could know is that in her previous lives she had already worked hard to attain the high goal of spiritual enlightenment and was very close to reaching it. Well, as we said, one day Gotami went to the market where she saw a man selling a veritable mountain of gold at throwaway prices. So she asked the man with just a little twinkle in her eyes, "Sahib, why are you selling all of this gold and at such a cheap price at that?" He growled back, "Gold? What do you mean gold? Can't you see that this is nothing more than a pile of useless ashes?" Yes, I know, we need to take another step back and find out a little bit more about this man and how this crazy situation came about. First of all, we should not think of him as a poor man in the ridiculous position of trying to sell nothing for something, but as an extremely wealthy man living in a huge house. And in this large dwelling he had hoarded more gold than many a king might possess. In his special vault, the walls were covered from top to bottom with gold bars. He loved his gold and often enjoyed just gazing at it. He did not put it to any use, but often just stood in its presence, adoring it. Then one day, as he went to spend his customary time gazing at his treasure, it was all gone. Instead, there were large heaps of ashes. Ashes, ashes, and more ashes. He felt as though his entire life had come to an end. Just then a friend of his dropped by, a smart and religious man. You know, the kind of person who is liable to give you an answer to your question before you've even had a chance to ask it. The formerly rich man greeted him by crying out, "Look at this mess! All of my gold is gone. I'm ruined. I'm destroyed. Look, I have nothing left. What can I do?" His friend tried to calm him down. "What do you mean you have nothing left? You have the largest collection of ashes in any household in this province. Let me tell you what you should do. Tomorrow go to the market, set yourself up in a little stall with a big pile of these ashes, and start to sell them. You may just find yourself on the road to financial recovery in no time." And thus, here he was, one of the richest men in the area, at least before this happened, squatting behind a heap of ashes, trying to sell them. Needless to say, He didn't get any business other than some laughter and ridicule from some people who formerly might have feared him. So, when Gotami asked him why he was selling his gold for such a cheap price, she definitely touched a nerve. "Gold! Who sent you here to make sport of my misfortune? Can't you see that these are simply ashes?" "But, Sahib," she replied, "are you playing a little game with me? I can see that this is gold and not a pile of ashes." He retorted, "Well, go ahead then, reach into the pile and grab a handful of this stuff, look at it and tell me what it is." Gotami did as he suggested. She reached into the pile and her hand came out clutching a shiny piece of gold. At that moment, every person in the market, including the man himself, realized that they had been under an illusion, and that the supposed ashes still were his gold, just as much now as before. "Now I understand what my friend was trying to tell me," he rejoiced. "If it doesn't fulfill a purpose other than sitting on a shelf, it makes no difference whether it's gold or ashes." "Young lady, you're a wonderful girl, wise and good-looking. For some people, gold is no better than ashes. With you, Kisa Gotami, ashes turn into gold. It's about time that my son got married and you shall be his wife." And so, Kisa Gotami, the skinny girl from the slums, married into one of the richest and noblest families in the area. The wedding was beautiful. The bride could not have looked more sensational. The groom was nothing if not dreamy. Gotami and her husband loved each other and were extremely happy. She got to live in the big mansion with all possible comforts, the likes of which she hadn't even known existed. But there was some potential disharmony. A number of her new in-laws pretended to be kind to her on the outside, but she got the clear feeling that they resented her and thought that no one with her low background had any business being a part of their family. She could tell that they were just looking for a reason to get her tossed out of the house. In the meantime, she enjoyed her life protected by her husband and her father-in-law. And she resolved to live her life quietly without giving offense to anyone. The situation changed drastically to the better when she gave birth to a son. She no longer sensed the whispering behind her back or felt the resentment. After all, she had given birth to an heir in the family line, and at least half of his blood came from the proper side. Gotami enjoyed the lack of tension, but even more than that, she loved her baby and her husband. Several years passed. Somewhere along the line, Gotami experienced the grief of losing her husband, but the presence of her little boy helped her get through this time. She often went out with him to various places where he could run around and play. Gotami took good care of her son, but one day she was distracted for just a short moment and lost sight of him. Where could he be? Tommy let out a piercing scream. She had seen her child. There he lay on the ground without any sign of movement or breathing. There was a small red mark on his foot. It looked as though he might have been bitten by a poisonous snake. Death had already cast its pallor over his little body. Gotami stared at the reality, but could not accept it. She picked up his lifeless body. As she stood there, paralyzed by grief for him, she could not help but think of the practical consequences if the boy were truly dead. Gotami assumed that the in-laws would now revert to their previous hostile disposition. No doubt they would simply throw the child's body into the charnel grounds, where it would be left to decay and to be consumed by vultures, jackals, and other scavengers. She would be sent back to the slums from which she had come. She would live for the rest of her life in abject poverty with the filth and disease that were its inevitable companions. Gotami did not think that she could ever go back to that subhuman way of life. No, she decided, a tiny wound that small could not possibly have killed her son. He must still be alive. There must be a medicine against whatever beset him, and Gotami resolved that she would find the medicine that would restore him. Cradling him in her arms, she rushed to the doctor. He immediately realized that the boy was dead and that no one could do anything about it. But seeing her emotional state, he couldn't bring himself to say so, and he just told her that, sorry, but he did not have any medication for him at this time. This first lack of success did not prevent Gotami from meandering from place to place, carrying the corpse, asking if anyone had a medicine for him. Some people felt deeply sorry for her. Others thought she was crazy. Everyone was outwardly nice and humored her delusion. They all pretty much repeated the doctor's line. Unfortunately, they did not have the right kind of potion, spell, amulet, or whatever. Late in the day, after visiting countless homes, she finally encountered a man who was able to give her some positive information. If there's anyone who can prepare medicine for your son, it is Shakyamuni, the Buddha. He is currently holding discourses in the village next to ours. Why don't you go to see him and see if he can help you? Against all reason, Gotami, still clutching her son's body, braved the nighttime jungle with all of its dangers and had no trouble finding Shakyamuni. Now, we must understand that the Buddha knew of Gotami's dedication in her previous lives and that she was just a very short step from enlightenment. Gotami poured out her heart. Lord Buddha, you're my last and only chance. My son is deathly ill, and he needs some kind of a special medicine, but nobody can give me any. Someone said that you probably had one. Could you possibly make a medicine that will restore my boy, please? Yes, I can, said the Buddha, but you need to supply the one ingredient that's necessary for it. I need a single mustard seed. You need to go to somebody's house and ask for it. As soon as you have it, bring it to me. But there's one condition. The seed must come from a house that has never been beset by death. Once you bring me a mustard seed from a family in which no one has died, I can easily make that medicine for you. Do you understand what I'm asking for? Certainly, Lord Buddha. Thank you so much. You have finally given me hope. I will set right out, and I will return to you with the seed. You will love my boy when you see him back to his normal, healthy self. And so Gotami went on a second quest, all the while carrying her son's dead body. In a few moments she knocked on the door of the first house. The woman who lived there opened the door, and Gotami immediately voiced her request. It's really nothing. My name is Gotami, and Shakyamuni is going to make a medicine for my boy, and I was just wondering if you might have just one single mustard seed you could spare, but... One mustard seed? Sure, we got plenty of those. But wait, thank you so much, but it's not that easy. Before I can take the seed, I'm supposed to ask you if anyone has ever died in this house. The woman was taken aback. Of course there have been deaths. Well, thank you anyway, then. I'm afraid I can't take your seed. And Gotami, no longer as upbeat as she had been, scurried off to the next house. It was the same thing, house after house. Sure, they were happy to contribute a mustard seed. But had they been left untouched by death? Of course not. One woman was quite nice, but particularly animated. Sweetie, do you have any idea what you're asking for? Easily as many people have died here as have lived here. Do you really think that anyone has not had to grieve over a death, not just once, but many times? While the woman was still talking, it suddenly occurred to Gotami precisely what she had to do. She went back into the jungle with her dead boy's body. She had come to see all the recent events as not just isolated occurrences, but as signifying the very nature of the entire cosmos. She made a solemn declaration. This is not just an ordinance of some village or city, nor does it apply just to this or that family or clan. It applies to every world, including its gods. This is the universal law. Nothing is permanent. She deposited the little corpse on the charnel grounds herself. Then, after a few more moments of reflection, she returned to Shakyamuni. Thank you, Lord Buddha. Your medicine has worked. I now see that the more we attach ourselves to someone or something, the harder it will be to tolerate the inevitable loss that is bound to happen. The Buddha confirmed her insight. All people whose minds, like a mental illness, are glued to their offspring and possessions. Once they encounter death, it will stun them, as though a tsunami had suddenly inundated a sleeping village. Gotami bowed down 3 times before the Buddha. Then she asked him if he would allow her to join his order as a nun, a bhikkhuni, and he gave his approval. She was careful and mindful in all of her new observances. Just a short while later, she received full enlightenment and became an arhat, a holy person. Later on, she summarized her experience. I have healed the festering wound caused by the arrow and dropped my burden. I have completed my obligations. My heart is entirely liberated. This testimony comes directly from me, Kisa Gotami Terry. Skinny Gotami, the Holy Elder. The title Terry means that she had become one of the founding elders of Buddhism, joining 6 other women in that order.